The Airbus A340 is gone. The last one rolled off the line in November 2011. 380 orders, 377 delivered, then nothing. Most people think the reason is simple. 2 engines got cheaper to fly than 4. Twin jets won, quad jets lost, end of story. But that explanation skips the part that actually matters. The A340 wasn't just outcompeted, it was built to solve a problem that stopped existing while the plane was still in production. Airbus didn't lose a fair fight. They designed an airplane around a rule, and then watched the rule get erased out from under it. So before we get into how that erasure happened, there's something about why the A340 has 4 engines at all that almost nobody outside aviation knows. In the mid-1980s, twin-engine jets were locked out of huge parts of the map. Regulators required them to stay within a set flying time of a diversion airport, in case one engine failed over open ocean. 60 minutes at first. 4-engine planes didn't have that restriction at all. So when Airbus needed a long-range widebody that could fly transatlantic and trans-Pacific routes without asking permission from every regulator on the route, they didn't reach for better engines. They reached for more of them. 4 CFM56 engines, the same engine family used on the Boeing 737, bolted onto a widebody frame. Not because that was the most efficient design on paper, because 4 engines meant no rulebook could ground the route, and Airbus was betting that rulebook would stay in place. It worked for a while, but it came with a cost baked directly into the airframe. 4 smaller engines produce more drag and more combined weight than 2 big ones doing the same job. Pilots joked that a fully loaded A340-300 didn't climb so much as wait for the Earth to curve away beneath it. One aviation writer put the actual number on it: a sluggish 1,000 feet per minute off the runway, fully loaded, while a twin-engine jet like a 777 could shove passengers back into their seats on takeoff. Later, Airbus tried to fix the underlying weakness with the -500 and -600 variants, fitting each with a Rolls-Royce Trent producing up to 60,000 pounds of thrust, nearly double the original CFM56. It solved the climb problem. It did nothing for the fuel bill. You can bolt on a bigger engine. You can't remove the fact that you're still running 4 combustion chambers instead of 2. Airbus knew all of this going in, they weren't blind to it. They were betting that the regulatory wall protecting 4-engine jets would hold long enough for the bet to pay off before anyone noticed the compromise underneath it. It didn't hold, and nobody rode that collapse more publicly or more expensively than Singapore Airlines. In 2004, Singapore took delivery of 5 A340 and 500s and used them to launch the longest nonstop commercial flight on Earth. Singapore to Newark, roughly 15,300 kilometers, 18 hours in the air, routed north over the pole. No stopover, no connection, just distance nobody else could touch at the time. The airline built a whole premium travel identity around that one number. All business and premium economy up front at launch, later stripped down to just 100 seats total in an all-business layout, so the plane could carry enough fuel to actually finish the trip without cutting into paying capacity. This wasn't a side project or a marketing stunt. This was Singapore Airlines' answer to the question of what a national carrier could be famous for in a crowded long-haul market. And they genuinely tried to make the economics work. When the original 2-class configuration didn't pencil out, they didn't cancel the route outright. They cut the cabin down, first trimming seat count, then reconfiguring to that stripped 100-seat, all-business layout, squeezing every unnecessary kilogram off the jet to stretch its range and protect its margins. That's a rescue plan, executed in real time, on an airplane already flying paying passengers. For years it worked well enough to keep the flight running and keep the record intact. Then 3 things closed in at once, and any one of them alone probably wouldn't have ended it. First, the rule of the A340 was built around simply stopped existing. Regulators extended twin-engine diversion limits further and further, from 60 minutes to 120, then 180. Eventually well beyond, until a twin-engine jet like the Boeing 777 could legally fly almost anywhere. The A340 could. The entire regulatory reason for 4 engines evaporated, and nobody had to out-engineer Airbus to make that happen. Someone just changed the paperwork, gradually, year after year. Second, physics never stopped being physics. Even with new Rolls-Royce Trent engines on the -500 and -600 variants, the A340 was burning somewhere around 25% more fuel per seat than the twin-engine jets flying the same routes. Singapore's A340-500 alone burned close to 8 tons of fuel an hour in cruise. That's not a rounding error across 18 hours in the air. Stretched over a decade of daily flights, that gap is the entire business case, quietly disappearing one flight at a time. Third, Airbus itself walked away from its own airplane. Instead of re-engineering the A340 to fight back, Airbus put its development money into the A350, a twin-engine widebody built explicitly to replace the very program it was now cannibalizing. There was no A340neo pitched internally, No rescue proposal coming from inside Airbus the way there was for other aging programs. The company had already decided quietly which airplane it actually wanted to win this fight. And here's the part that makes it personal instead of just technical. When Singapore finally pulled the plug on the Newark route in 2013, they didn't just retire the jets and move on quietly. Airbus bought all 5 A340-500s back directly, as part of a roughly $7.5 billion deal in which Singapore turned around and ordered more A380s and new A350s in the same transaction. The exact aircraft that made the A340 pointless were the ones Singapore used to replace it, financed on the same signature that ended the old jet's careers. Believing in an airplane and quietly planning for its replacement happened on the very same afternoon. There's something else the A340 never had, unlike the jumbo jets that came before it: a cargo version. The old 747 survived for decades, partly because freighters kept the production line running long after passenger demand faded elsewhere. The A340 never got that lifeline. There was no freighter variant absorbing surplus airframes once airlines moved on, no fallback market waiting in the wings. When the passenger case collapsed on any given route, there was nothing else propping the program up, and retired frames simply sat or got parted out, or got picked up cheap by smaller charter operators for a few more years. Some people inside the industry have argued the ETOPS rules didn't just evolve naturally on their own timeline, that Boeing pushed regulators hard because the 777 had no real answer to the A340's range advantage otherwise. Is that true? Hard to say for certain. There's no public paper trail proving coordinated pressure of that kind. The simpler explanation is that jet engines genuinely got dramatically more reliable through the 1990s, and regulators followed the reliability data as it came in, the same way they eventually would for every long-haul twin that came after the 777. But whether or not the rule change was actively engineered from outside, the A340 was designed entirely on the assumption that it wouldn't happen this fast. And it happened anyway, faster than Airbus's own timeline expected. Not every operator gave up at the same speed. Iberia, one of the biggest A340 customers, kept overhauling its -600s for continued long-haul service years after Singapore walked away, refreshing cabins rather than replacing frames outright. That kept a handful of A340s earning their keep well into the following decade. But refurbishing an old airframe isn't the same as fixing the underlying economics, and one loyal operator patching up old jets isn't a program surviving. It's a program winding down slowly instead of all at once. November 10th, 2011. Airbus confirms the A340 program is finished. Final tally: 380 orders, 377 aircraft delivered, production done after 2 decades on the line. Around that same period, Tim Clark of Emirates, whose airline had flown the type itself, summed up the whole airframe in one line: it was designed in the late 1990s with fuel at $25 to $30 a barrel. It fell over at $60. At $120, he said, it never had a hope in hell. 5 years after Singapore retired its last A340-500, the airline relaunched the exact same Singapore to Newark route in October 2018. Same flight numbers, same distance, roughly the same 18 hours in the air. This time on an Airbus A350-900 ULR, a twin-engine jet burning close to a third less fuel per hour than the plane it replaced. The record for the world's longest flight never actually went away. Only the number of engines required to hold it did. And that shift from 4 engines down to 2 on the longest routes on the planet is quietly reshaping something else entirely: how airlines decide which cities even get a nonstop flight in the first place, and which routes get left as a one-stop forever. That's a story worth its own video. Subscribe if you want it. Meanwhile, the aircraft built to outlast a rulebook ended up lasting about as long as the rulebook did, and not 1 day longer.